innocent sounding title is Donald Trump, a Threat to Democracy, which was a provocative question, yeah, with a question mark, which was a provocative question at the time. But the thing that prompted us was really, I guess, the first main thing was just way back then, candidate Trump saying he wouldn't necessarily accept the results of elections. And that's what kind of got us thinking about this. This is pretty unusual. That's the soft first alarm bell. Lots of people, I think, slept through that. The second alarm bell, I think, was probably the January 6th event. Literally not accepting the results of election and engaging in violence or supporting violence. And I think in some ways, there's lots of events one could point to, but the third kind of event that just made real very early this January of what's happening was the pardoning of the January 6th participants in the January assault. So why those three events? I think those three events are important because there's two cardinal rules of democracy, I would say. One, you have to accept elections, win or lose. And two, that you can't engage in violence or threaten violence to try to gain or to hold on to power. Those three events violated those two fundamental rules. And so those are the signs that there's lots of other stuff going on. So that's the second time round, that's what kind of had started my kind of suggested an inflection point. I guess one final thing I would add to it, though, is not something that happened, but something that didn't happen. And in particular, I think, it's not about a single individual. It's not about a single ambitious politician. There's always an infrastructure behind that person. And so in this case, I think in each of these moments, what I think has been very worrying is the relative silence of the Republican Party. So it's a broader institutional problem. So that the unwillingness to criticize this or to separate leading politicians, to separate themselves from these egregious violations of these cardinal rules. So it's the absence of something that in a way was an inflection point.
Wow, that's really interesting. And focusing on the elections and the rejection of the results, I wanted to key in on, so Peter and Daniel kind of focused on kind of what the non-democratic leaders are doing and how they're beating up institutions, whether it's electoral or judicial. And Freddie's really concerned about that also. But in the first answer to your question, it was about the majoritarian election of Chavez. So I wanted to ask how you're thinking about the popular support and whether that's an inflection point. Because definitely for me, one of the surprising things after the 2020 election, months after, 3 to 4 out of every 10 American voters don't believe Joe Biden had won the election. They still don't, right? And so I thought before 2020, Trump might not leave in the way that others have left. So that was, what actually happened was surprising, but, something in that ballpark, I thought, yeah, maybe. But this mass phenomenon of, in a way, democratic defection, or at least getting it very, very wrong in a way that is not good for democracy, was an inflection point for me. So I'm interested in what you think about the mass phenomenon version of it. How many people are supporting Chavez and then Maduro, and then what do you think about that? Is it illiberal democracy, in a positive way? Yeah.
What I would say is that I think me and many people I made the mistake, and I think sometimes some people still do it, still makes that mistake, of confusing symptoms with causes, right? So you speak about polarization, right? No, polarization is, it's the thing that creates polarization probably is a symptom of a bigger problem. And also this. So it's the problem is that people chose Chavez. Well, why people chose Chavez? Why people decided to vote for a person who was a military guy? Why they felt that they needed to do that, right? So I think that sometimes when we are fighting for democracy, we tend to limit the analysis in the institutional level and maybe underestimate the deep issues that makes a population to decide a strong leader that has undemocratic values. So, and I think we were talking about that the other day, and you were saying something very interesting, Arkan, and I think that we're talking about populism in general. And I think that what you said the other day, maybe you can develop yourself, how populism can be the illiberal democratic response to undemocratic liberal governance, right? And I think that